Hello guys, it's Flakes. You're probably new to the channel, and you're also wondering why I'm making a retrospect to Resident Evil, the remake, a year later. But I promise you it all makes sense a lot later down the line. For now, I just want you to enjoy the ride with me. I'll be going over stuff like gameplay, story, and what exactly makes it one of the best remakes of all time, and also rejuvenates the revival horror aspect of Resident Evil. So yeah, if you're interested in that stuff, please, I advise you to stick around.
Who are you really? Come on and tell us. You are a long way from home, cowboy. You have my sympathies.
Guess that's a local's way of breaking the ice. Anyway, you know what this is all about. My assignment is to search for the president's missing daughter.
What? All by yourself?
I'm sure you boys didn't just tag along so we could sing Kumbaya together at some Boy Scout bonfire. Then again, maybe you did.
Resident Evil 4 was finally released to the public in 2005 on the Nintendo GameCube. This game was huge. It changed the engine from RE2 and RE3 to MT Framework, which actually accurately depicts why the game was in such development hell. Speaking of RE2 and 3, there was a game called RE3.5, a prototype if you will. Basically, it released to the public in 2003 in an E3 release and showed glimpses of what this game could have been. Little did they know this game actually ended up becoming what we know today as the small little indie game called Devil May Cry. Also, did you know that Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis came out a year apart? Yeah, from 1998 to 1999, both games were in development and released fully to the public, meaning that this game, that came out in 2005, was the biggest hiatus that they ever had, going on 7 years, which is still insane to think about. But I mean, it's appropriate. The gameplay was so jarringly different that I don't even really believe that they had a choice but to go on a hiatus and actually be attentive and put care into this game in terms of development. I mean, think about it. Resident Evil 4 was one of the first survival horror games and one of the first games ever that ever did the over-the-top shooting angle. And, I mean, if you look at it, it's insanely jarring thinking about Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 3, and Resident Evil, the original one, all fixed camera angles with really bad gameplay angles and really hard to maneuver combat, especially when it came to aiming, which RE4 does exceptionally well. But I believe that's enough backstory for now. I'm pretty sure you all are eager to get me to move on to the next part about the gameplay, the thing I've been so stoked about talking about this entire video. Well, I'll get there, but just in case you need to see my credentials, here they are. And I believe it's even evident in my past videos that I'm a huge fan of the series. As a matter of fact, besides Capcom's Resident Evil series, I'm pretty sure the only series I would love more, if not for this one, would definitely be Sonic. So, nonetheless, I'm tired of yapping. Let's get into the game. I'll be completely direct here. I think this is the best gameplay that anything in the entire Resident Evil series has ever had to offer. It's so fluid, so nice. Everything complements each other well. There's new mechanics mixed along with old ones, and honestly, I just think it's amazing in every way. Sure, it's flawed in certain ways, but I'll get to that later. It's good to know here that they basically are just building on what they had in Resident Evil 4. Being able to melee was new to RE4, but new to RE4 Remake is obviously the parry and the new knife system, which I think is good because it incentivizes wanting to use your knife and also giving a new system for you to work with, increasing the durability and such. And I also think it sticks to the survival horror roots because you're always thinking of your next move, if you should upgrade it, if you should repair it, if you should kill a Ganado that's turning. So I think it's a nice addition. I think it's very well put together, especially for a game that's banking on it being survival horror. Outside of the gunplay, one thing that is instantly noticeable when it comes to this game is the enemy variety, and I absolutely love it. They have Gastados, obviously, when you enter the village, and then as the game keeps going on and on, they get inflected by Plaga, creating really tense situations where certain weapons are better and more suited for certain needs when you play against these villagers. My only nitpick with this and the variety of enemies is that it feels like they kind of inflated in certain sections of the game later on to enhance the difficulty, which in my opinion, I hate games that their only way of enhancing the difficulty is just randomly adding a bunch of randomly generated spawn points for these zombies to come in. It just seems inconceivable and not fair, and it doesn't ramp up the difficulty, it just makes it insanely tedious. Another thing this game brought to the Resident Evil franchise was an upgrade system. And honestly, I love it. It brings and incentivizes and really puts into play the aspect of survival horror that this game really wanted to emphasize. You always think to yourself if you want to upgrade durability for your knife, or if you need to increase on your ammo, or if you want to increase the power on your TMP, your SMG, because it only does like 50 to start. I think it's an amazing way to incentivize players thinking about their next action before they commit it. And this is especially apparent upon harder difficulties, where enemies do twice the damage and the prices for the items go up, meaning that you really have to think about what you want to do before you do it. I'll elaborate on this more as we get into the level design section later on into this video, but I feel like the level design of Resident Evil 4, the castle, the village, and then lastly, the factory setting, perfectly represents the urgency of style of play that you play with the game. And not only that, I feel like it perfectly depicts the setting and tone of the game when you play it. The only nitpick for the combat in this game I have is the absolutely redundant way that stun lock tears the immersion from the game and the gameplay. I don't know if you've been watching the gameplay in the background, but every time on a hit, your player has a frame where they just sit still, and that leaves them open and vulnerable to a bunch of different attacks. Now, I'm not saying that it's a bad idea to punish players for being hit, but it is absolutely absurd that everything in this game has stun. It makes it so slow and so janky in certain situations, especially when you're going up against a pool of enemies. In this next section, I'll give a short expedited summary of all the parts of Resident Evil 4 Remake. I like to believe that Resident Evil 4 Remake is split up into 4 parts. Part 1 being the village, Part 2 being the castle, Part 3 being the laboratory, and then Part 4 being the island, which, I hate the island, but we'll get to that. Don't worry about it. In my opinion, I believe that the tone for each and every one of these sets them perfectly. We'll start with the village section, probably the most notable section of the entirety of RE Remake's adaptation of RE4. Honestly, I think this is the peak point of the game's set design. I mean, everything feels so clustered and cluttered, claustrophobic, and it has this urgency that fits the tone of the start of the game perfectly. And in my opinion, what makes it one of the best video game openings of all time. I think something notable here that a lot of people don't think about is how the village section isn't just the opening attack. It's also the church, it's also Del Lago, and a bunch of other things. I mean, it's super expansive. You get to see multiple different members of the Los Illuminados before the Plaga, and I really like this. It makes them seem more feral and more rabid, like they're actually being controlled by the Plaga. Next up is the castle, probably and most likely the most famous part of the game for a multitude of reasons. I think the set design perfectly contributes to this feeling. This is when the Plaga starts to mutate, so it has this feeling of body horror and disgustingness that can't be reached in any other point of the section of the game. Also important to note, just like the village section, the castle section was expanded upon way more on the RE4 remake, and also they give remakes to stuff like the hallway scene and the cloaked enemy that you see currently on screen. I think they redefined what this game meant, and really gave life to each one of these settings. The next and second to last section of the entire game is the laboratory section. Started off with Luis's death and the fight with Krauser. Personally, I think that the laboratory part is the best because of the feeling of tension and the psychological thrill that you get from going through it. Obviously, you get the fight against regenerators, in my opinion, the best part of this game and this remake. And also, you get some really cool set pieces. And on top of all of that, you also get to see some pretty cool notes and files that enlarge what you'd already known about the game. If I could hate on Dale on this, I would. I genuinely hate everything about the design philosophy of the island section. I really hate it. I mean, who invented it? It's everything wrong with Resident Evil 4. Abundance of enemy variety that doesn't belong. It's so off-putting. There's like thousands of enemies with no variety, no tone, no setting. Oh, I hate it so much. It doesn't even look good either. Like, I don't know who created it. I hate it. Why? Why does it? Oh my goodness, man. This video was a long time in production. All the mixing, the editing, the frames, the keyframes, the overlays. But I like the way it turned out. And I really like this format of storytelling. It gives me a platform to express my love for these video games that I didn't get to do with other people. I really want to thank the fourth YouTuber who gave me this idea. Her name is The Sphere Hunter on YouTube. She talks about Resident Evil content. And it's also this guy named The Fourth Snake, which I get retrospective ideas from him. I would have never imagined myself doing a retrospective video. I could tell that it had to be really attentive and had to have a lot of care. And I didn't think I was ready for that yet. But this is a huge milestone for my channel. I really enjoyed making this video, and I really hope you enjoy watching it. Nonetheless, I love you, and God bless.